Joining us now to talk about it, Democratic strategist Bridget Todd, and on the right, political strategist Joe Lestingi. Bridget, Todd, we welcome you both back to America's Forum.
Thanks for
It's a
having me.
pleasure to be here.
We really do appreciate it. Let's begin with what one of the establishment newspapers has to say. The Washington Post says this, that Mr. McDaniel embodies what the GOP fears about the Tea Party. Quoting now, he has come to represent everything that establishment Republicans fear about the Tea Party. He is aggressive, unpredictable, and at times insensitive, if not offensive, on matters of gender and race. Bridget, I got to start with you, and for purposes of full disclosure, as a broadcaster plus a former office holder, it seems like the Washington Post editorial page and some of the other pages give the Democrats an in-kind donation every chance they get. This leg up defining this Republican primary as a battle with a, quote, wild-eyed conservative, does that portend good things for Democrats in Mississippi and elsewhere?
I wouldn't say necessarily. I think that the Washington Post, I don't think they're necessarily incorrect in their portrait of him as this sort of wild card guy. I think he has some interesting stuff in his past in terms of, connections to the KKK and sort of things he said on his radio program. So I don't think they're wrong in sort of pointing that out. But I do think that they might be a little bit short-sighted in thinking that those things are going to spell sudden doom for him when it comes time to vote.
Bridget, since you mentioned the initials KKK, let me just ask you as a Democratic strategist, were you troubled that the late Senator Robert Byrd, Democrat of West Virginia, held positions of leadership for so long in the United States Senate, himself having been a member of the Ku Klux Klan?
I don't want anybody with any ties to the Ku Klux Klan sort of making decisions for folks and sort of in higher office.
Well, here's the line of reasoning. And I'm not trying to beat up on you, rhetorically speaking, but one of the first fundraising letters for Barack Obama in his campaign for the U.S. Senate was penned by Robert Byrd. Now, on the Republican side, and you made reference to the Daily Beast article, the Daily Beast is claiming as a, quote, KKK connection is the campaign of Chris McDonnell taking a donation from Carl Ford, who served as legal counsel for Sam Bowers, apparently an imperial wizard in the KKK. Joe, what happens now? I guess in the world, according to the Washington Post and the dominant media culture, the rules for a Republican are these: turn over your donation, while several years ago it was just fine for Barack Obama to have Robert Byrd, a former Klan imperial wizard, write a letter on his behalf to raise money.
Well, there are a few things here. First, let me just clarify. I'm a Democratic strategist. I work on the left, so this might be a little bit of a biased argument between the two of us. But I will say this, and I'll take a little bit of a more moderate stance here. Robert Byrd obviously had denounced his past and had moved past that, generations ago. That doesn't excuse that type of behavior, but this was a generational occurrence back in the southern states in the 40s and 50s, and to hold them accountable for that for the rest of their lives and not allowing them to move past that is one thing. I will say this: if you're an active member, and as the situation sort of goes down there, if you are continuing to spew that type of rhetoric, you do have a bit of a problem there politically. I mean, it's bad enough that this man is as extreme as they say he is. I mean, he does have some out there comments. Thad Cochran is in some serious trouble right now, and I would say that the Republican Party of Mississippi does have some problems with this if he wins that nomination. You've got to denounce those the minute they occur, and you've got to talk about reconciliation. I'm a Southerner. I'm from a southern state, and I understand that the past there is something that we have to move on from, and it's important to reconcile that going forward.
Well, it just fascinates me, again, if attorneys have to represent someone or take on a case, then presumably they're supposed to have the mindset of that person. Later in this program, we're going to have F. Lee Bailey on, who represented O.J. Simpson in our third hour. I don't believe anyone is suggesting that Counselor Bailey is somehow carrying a political torch for domestic difficulties and violence. But it's just very interesting to see how this is wrapped up. What it does say is that certainly this is contentious with all the attendant Mississippi mud. You referenced the polling. Let's take a look. A new WPA research poll has Chris McDaniel with an 8-point lead over Thad Cochran. So with this situation, I guess for political survival, Thad has to pull out all the stops, thus the story we see in today's Daily Caller.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. He's got some serious problems. And I'll say this too. I mean, he's got to do the opposite of what Cantor did, which is pull off the upset here. He can't get upset. And that could work in his favor to be the underdog. Unfortunately, given the original primary results and the way the electorate will look in this runoff, he's got a big hill to climb, and I think his camp needs to be very nervous. Hopefully, over the next week, they can go out there and they can run a strong campaign and they can do well. But I don't see it happening down there. I think Mr. McDaniel is going to be the next senator from Mississippi.
Bridget, does that open the door for Mississippi Democrats again? Because what gets lost in this is Thad Cochran 40 years ago, when Mississippi was essentially a one-party state, guys like Thad Cochran came in and actually set up the Republican Party. It doesn't seem the history is going to work for him this time, and maybe you've been involved in runoffs in the South on your side of the aisle. What should people keep in mind going into this kind of runoff election, Bridget?
I think that people should, I couldn't agree more with Joe. I think that the Cochran camp has a lot to be nervous about. I think that you definitely saw that with Cantor in Virginia. I think that people need to not ignore the power of grassroots organizing. And I think we see it on the left all the time. I think you're seeing it again on the right. People getting kind of fired up, whipped into a frenzy, really does make an impact. And I think, this is a race where you've got lots of money being pumped in, but I think ultimately people need to not discount grassroots organizing and sort of the power of that. And I do think that—
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think
and if I could add just real quick, the one thing that is fascinating here, if you're from a Democratic perspective, the long-term implications of a Thad Cochran loss in Mississippi actually do bode well for Democrats. The Senate race this year, given the electorate in a midterm election, it will be very difficult for the Democrats to win that seat. But long-term for party growth, this does help. I mean, it does help to have someone, and I hate to say it like this, but have someone on the other side who you can use to organize your own people, similar to how Mr. McDaniel is using Thad Cochran's Senate tenure to run against him and organize against him.
Again, regardless of party registration or political philosophy, there are some basic features of a campaign that can be very interesting. For example, Mr. McDaniel has been out there asking the incumbent to debate with him.
Yes.
Let's take a listen to Thad Cochran's explanation for why he is not going to debate Chris McDaniel. Listen.
I'm not running to be a member of a debate team. I'm a candidate for the U.S. Senate.
Perhaps a bit facile response, since presumably you go to the floor of the United States Senate to debate the important questions. Is that playing into the hands of the challenger, Bridget?
I don't think, if I had to say, I don't think that was a smart move. I think folks want to see this debate happen. I think not doing it, I think only makes you, raises more questions as to why you won't do it. I think that wasn't a smart strategy.
Absolutely not. I couldn't agree more. That was a very poor strategic move on his part. Debates, what his attempt to do here, and I'm going to get into the weeds just a little bit, but what his attempt was not to give Mr. McDaniel the credibility that he deserved to be on the stage with him. That was the wrong move, especially given those primary results. He should debate him right away. And if he's very proud of his work, stand up for his work. I encourage clients to do that all the time. If you're proud of what you did, stand up for your votes. Explain your side of the argument, because right now, the only person talking and getting all the free media is Mr. McDaniel.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what transpires a week from today, and we very much appreciate your insights. Joe Lestingi, Bridget, Todd, thanks for joining us today with a Democratic take on this Republican primary in the Magnolia State. Good to have you with us.
Thanks
It's a
for
pleasure
having
to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we got the perspective of two Democrat consultants, and it's kind of interesting to see their take on it. I'm interested in your take. Will McDaniel prevail in the runoff in Mississippi next week, or will this late spending by Thad Cochran pull the incumbent through? Why don't you tweet me your comments at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. There is also email. Our address is connect@newsmaxtv.com. And let's not forget Facebook, y'all. You can get to us on Facebook at facebook.com/Newsmax. We're coming right back with more here on America's Forum.